Exam practice. Test 4. Test 3. Listening. Part 1. Part 1. You will hear a number of different recordings, and you will have to answer questions on what you hear. There will be time for you to read the instructions and questions, and you will have a chance to check your work. All the recordings will be played once only in 4 parts. The test is in 4 parts. At the end of the test, you will be given 10 minutes to transfer your answers to an answer sheet. Now turn to part 1. You will hear a man who runs a transport hire company talking to a woman who wants to hire a vehicle, and a man who is interested in taking part in this event. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 5. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 5. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen, because you will not hear the recording a second time. You should answer the questions as you listen, and answer questions 1 to 5. The recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 5.
Good morning, Island Transport Company. This is Brian speaking.
Morning. This
hello.
Is Jenny
Is this the right number to call
I'm
for the short
visiting
film
the island
competition?
Next week and
Yes,
I want to
how
hire
can
some
I
form of
help?
transport.
I know
No
the
problem,
competition's
Jenny.
been running
Island
for
Transport
10
can offer a
years,
range
but
of
I've
different
never taken
vehicles to
part
hire.
before.
So
I want to be
the
clear
first
on the
option
rules.
is a motor scooter.
Is
They're
20
very
minutes
popular.
the maximum
right.
length of the film?
And how
That's
much do
correct.
they cost to hire?
So, shall I run
Well,
through
you
some
can
of the
hire
other
them by
rules
the
for
hour
entry?
or by the day.
That'd be great.
Per hour,
I'll make
it's
some notes.
$15.50.
All right, so
And
the
what
deadline for
about
getting
for a
the whole
day?
film
Daily,
made and
it's
sending it in to us is on
$49.99.
Wednesday, May
That
the 15th.
includes a full tank of petrol,
really?
but you need to fill it up
I
before you
thought
bring
the
it
submission
back.
date was
Is a
sometime at
scooter
the
a
end
good
of
way to
June,
get around the island?
30th.
Oh, yes.
That's
it's a
when
lot
the
of fun.
judges announce the
Visitors
winners.
really enjoy it.
Right.
Do you
I guess
provide
I don't have
helmets?
as much time
Yes,
to
of
make
course,
this
all
film as I
sizes.
thought.
We can also
Now,
let you have
just so
gloves
it's
as
clear,
well. It's not a
one
bad
of the
idea.
rules is about the team
yes,
of
I
people
hadn't
you
thought
have
of that.
working with
The
you.
only thing is with
Will
the
you be
scooters,
doing most of the
you have
filming
to keep to
yourself?
sealed roads.
Probably,
That means you
yes.
can't ride on
Okay,
Battenberg Road.
but perhaps
so
you'll be
you
needing
can't
some
visit the
technical
far end of the
support with
island.
editing and the audio.
Sorry, I
I
didn't
imagine
catch the name
so.
of the road.
That's
Could you
fine,
spell it?
but you can't
Sure.
employ any
It's spelled
professional actors, I'm afraid.
B-A-T-T-E-M-B-U-R-G.
They all need to be new to acting, having a go for the first
But
time.
there are still plenty of
I
other
see.
places you can explore
Not a
on
problem.
scooter.
Now, I
Okay,
know that
and
one of the
what about
rules
a
is about
car?
the things
Yes,
you
we've got a
need to
range of
include
cars.
in your film.
Well,
That's
there's
right.
4 of us.
Last year, all
But if
films
we
had
do
to
go for
include
the
a scene
car
with a
option,
broken
we'd be
pair
happy
of
with a very
glasses.
small basic one.
What about
An
this
economy
year?
car would be
Well, it's been
$87.80 per
decided
day.
that one of your main
That's for a
characters has to be
four-door
a
car.
child.
It can take 5
Or
passengers.
if you prefer, it
Right,
could be
okay.
an animal instead.
And a car is the best
but we
way
have
to
to
see
see
the
them in
whole
a
island.
number of scenes,
You
okay?
can drive on all the roads.
All right.
And if
I'll
you'd
have
like
a
to go
think
for a
about
swim,
that.
you can
I'm
drive
not
right
sure
down
which
to
one would
Green
be
Bay, which
easier to
visitors
work
love.
with.
It
Well, a
can
car is
certainly be a
definitely
challenge,
something to consider.
but that's what the competition
It's
is all
certainly a
about.
good price if
now,
we split
it's
it
not
between the
just
4 of
our
us.
rules you
Exactly.
need to think about. You
Only
might
thing
also
is,
need to
it's
get
pretty
permission,
hot at this
say,
time
for
of year.
example, if you
Does the
decided
car
you
have
wanted
air
to add some
conditioning?
music
Not
to the
that
film.
model, no.
That sounds
you
complicated.
need one of our bigger cars if you
I
want
suppose
that.
I could
Well,
use a
maybe it
local
doesn't matter.
band, people I know that would help out. I wouldn't need permission in that
Before
case.
you hear the rest of the
Good
conversation,
idea.
you have some
Then you
time
don't
to
need
look
to
at
worry about
questions
the legal
6 to
side of
10.
things.
All right, that's clearer. Actually, is that right that the film doesn't need to be in English?
Yes, because if a film wins the competition in this country, it could end up being part of an international competition. But if you're going to use another language, you've got to provide subtitles, and those do have to be in English and 100% accurate. If they're not, your film won't
Now
be
listen
accepted
and
in the
answer
competition.
questions 6
Seems
to 10.
fair.
The
Before
other
you
option
hear
to
the rest of the
consider is an
conversation,
e-bike.
you have some time
These are
to
very
look at
popular,
questions
like a
6
normal
to 10.
bicycle, but with electric power to help you along.
How much are they?
Normally they're $59 per day, but I can offer you a discounted rate at the moment of $52.20.
Oh, okay.
To be honest, a lot of our customers these days prefer e-bikes to motor scooters because they're so quiet and peaceful. On some e-bikes, the battery is really heavy, but on these bikes, it's nice and light.
I've never ridden
Now
an
listen
e-bike
and
before.
answer questions
How
6
difficult is
to
it?
10.
Not difficult at all. You'll find they are very easy
I
to handle.
don't suppose you
like
could
I say,
give me
just
any
a normal
advice
pedal bike,
about
really, but you
making
don't
the
have to
film,
do too much work.
Of course.
Which is a good thing because the
in my
island is
opinion,
quite hilly.
It's the script that
These
you
are
should
good quality
concentrate
bikes
on.
too.
That
Well
comes
made
first.
with high quality
Work
brakes,
out
both
what
front and
everyone's
back,
going to say
so
and
you won't
go
have
from
any
there.
problems.
Okay, thanks for that.
Does sound like a lot of
and
fun.
I read somewhere that
Do they
you
come with
shouldn't have
GPS?
too many characters
No, but we
or
can
locations.
provide you with a map.
Yeah,
What
I'd
about a
agree with that.
lock?
Yep,
I
one of
also
those
read
as well
that
with each
with
bike,
short films,
so you can
the
leave it
judges have
securely
their
if you want to.
preferences.
I
I
think
mean,
my
they
friends will
seem
like
to
the
like
idea of
films
an
with a
e-bike.
serious
A
message,
good
like a
compromise.
documentary.
Well, like I say,
I guess
they're
I
very
shouldn't do
popular
a
these
comedy
days.
because not
and
everyone
another big
laughs at the
advantage
same
is that
thing.
you don't have to have a license
Yes,
for this
stay
type of
away
vehicle.
from that kind of film.
Well, let me
a
discuss
story
it
with
with
a
my
clear
friends and I'll
beginning,
get back to
middle,
you.
and end.
problem.
That's what the
Thanks for your
judges look
time.
for.
I was thinking I could look at some of the films from last year's
That is the
competition,
end of part
you
one.
know,
You now
to give
have
me a
1
better
minute
idea
to check
of what
your
to do.
answers.
Yes, you could certainly do that. If you go to our website, have a look at last year's winner. His name was Greg Hislop.
How did you spell that last name?
Sure, it's Hyslop. His film was actually one of the shorter ones, but the judges really liked it.
Actually, I'm wondering if I've seen that one already. Isn't it about an artist? Someone who no one appreciates, but then she ends up selling lots of her paintings.
That's right. If you want to have another look, the film is called Imagine. It really holds your attention.
Thanks. I'll have another look after this call.
So, you know what the prizes are? It's $500 for third place, up to $2,000 for the overall winner. And of course, the winning films are shown in a theatre so the public can see them too.
That would be an amazing thing to happen. So that would be the Bridge Theatre, would it, in the city centre?
Yes, that's my favourite theatre,
Exam
actually.
practice,
Lovely
test
view of the
4.
river.
Listening,
So, do you
part
have any
2.
more questions that you want to run by?
That is the
You
end
will
of
hear a
part
man
1.
talking to a group
You now
of people
have
who are
1
looking
minute
around
to
a
check your
community
answers.
garden. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15.
Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 15.
Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to this open day at the community garden. Our garden belongs to the local community, and as you'll see, what we grow here is mostly fruit and different kinds of vegetables. First, I'll tell you some background information.
Exam practice.
Well, recently,
test 3.
we made an
Listening,
interesting discovery
part
at the
2.
garden. Before, we didn't know much about the history of this site. We only had a few
You will hear a
documents
man
and
talking
records.
to a group of
Then we
volunteers
found
who
some
are involved
ancient
in
implements
conservation work
like spades
in an
and
area
forks
called
for digging.
Eskdale Wood.
They were buried
First, you
in
have
the
some
earth.
time to look at questions
Experts say
11
these
to
are at least
14.
1,000 years old. So people have been using this land for growing produce for a long time. There are some photographs of these implements in the clubhouse, as well as a diagram of what we think the garden might have looked like, if you want to look later. So, why was this location so good for gardening? As you can see, we're in a slight valley, and storms blow very hard up this valley, which can be a problem. But being in a valley, we get good freezing frosts here in winter, which
Now
gardeners
listen
like
carefully
because it kills
and
the
answer
bugs.
questions
The
11 to 14.
great thing, though, is the stream that runs through the valley, so we can irrigate the
Hello,
gardens
everyone.
even through long, dry
Thanks
summers.
for volunteering to help
Now,
with our
what we do
conservation
know
work
is
in
that in
Eskdale Wood
1860,
next weekend.
gardening stopped here.
A big group like this
was
means
a
we
time
can
of
really
rapid
achieve a lot.
development in this area. And on that
Let's
date,
start
the
with the
city
tasks we
infirmary
need to
was
get
constructed
done.
on this site, so this
I'm
is where
happy to say that
doctors and
since the
surgeons
last
work to
clean-up
take
of the
care
wood,
of the health
litter
needs of the
hasn't
growing
returned.
population.
So that's one job we
Also,
can forget about.
many new houses were
But
put up
because
for
of the
people
recent
who
storm,
commuted
there's
into
been
the
damage
city
to some
each day to
older
work.
trees.
There was even
A
talk of a
few
new
big
military
branches
camp,
have come down,
although that
and they're
never
blocking
happened
the
in the end.
paths.
Then in the
We
1980s,
need volunteers to pull them
the
off
old
and
buildings
pile
here
them up
were
somewhere else,
removed,
so they're not
and
in the
this
way.
land again became a
While you're
productive
working,
garden.
Have a look at the
Today,
bird boxes we
these
placed in the
gardens
wood
produce
last
large
summer.
quantities of fruit
We're sure
and
that
vegetables.
most of them have been used,
Each plot
so
of
that
land
was a
is
job
worked by a
worth doing.
volunteer member of the garden,
The storm
and they
has
donate
also blown
what they
down the
grow
fences
to
on the
families in
north
this
side of the
neighbourhood
wood.
who are struggling
So we'll
financially.
need you to give a hand with repairs.
Occasionally, we're
There'll be
approached by
someone
local
there to
businesses and
supervise,
restaurants
so
wanting
you'll
to
get
buy
that
our
job done
organic
quite
produce,
quickly.
but we just don't have enough.
What do you need to
We
bring with
also
you?
have a good relationship with
Gloves
the local
are essential.
college. In
You
fact,
don't want to end up
several
with
of the
cuts and
academics
dirt
there
all over
are
your
members
hands.
of the garden.
If you don't
Each
have a
week,
good pair
undergraduates
already,
enrolled on
I'd
the
suggest
college's
popping into town
horticulture
and buying a
course
pair
have
from
a
the
class
garden
here
centre.
to learn about their
They
subject
seem to have a good
firsthand.
range.
And in future,
Now,
the
the
college hopes to
forecast
hold
is for
workshops
cloud,
here to help
but at
local
least
people
it'll be a dry
establish
weekend.
vegetable gardens at home.
You can leave your sunscreen at home. As usual,
Before
we'll
you
be
hear the
handing
rest of
out
the
any
talk,
tools you
you have
need
some
at the
time to
start
look at
of the day.
questions 16 to
Spades,
20.
saws, hammers, it'll all be supplied. There are parts of Eskdale Wood which are still muddy after the storm, so I'd recommend boots. You'll need to supply your own, and I'd put them on in the car park if I were you before you enter the woods. And thanks to some funding from the local residents committee, we've got a bit of money for snacks, so I'll be bringing some sandwiches with me for everyone.
Now listen and answer questions 16
Before
to
you
20.
hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 15 to 20.
Now I'll just point out a few places of interest around the gardens. So can you all look at your maps, please? OK, so we're now standing at the main entrance to the gardens, outside the clubhouse. So you might be interested in our worm farms. This is where we make fertiliser. To get there, from the main entrance, head north. You'll pass gardens on either side of the path. Just before the path curves round to the right, there's a turning on the left. Go down there and the worm farms are inside the first building you come
to 20.
It's also worth visiting our seed store. Again,
Right.
head north and
Some
follow
of
the
you
path
have
as it
expressed an
curves round
interest
to
in
the
taking
right
part
through
in
the
this year's
gardens.
bird count.
You'll come to the orchard.
The bird count is really
Follow
useful.
the path around the
It tells
edge of the
us
orchard,
which native
but
birds are
don't
doing
go
well,
too far.
or if their
The
numbers are
seed store is
declining.
actually
And we can
located
also find out
inside
if
the
there
orchard,
are any new species
a very
of birds.
pretty spot.
Birds that don't normally
Now, the
inhabit
machinery
woods.
shed might interest some of
So,
you.
if you decide
From
to
the
take
main
part in
entrance,
the bird count,
just go into the
there
car
are a
park
few
and walk
things you
right
need
to
to
the
do.
end. You'll see a little path heading out
Nowadays,
to the west.
people don't tend
It's
to
down
record
there.
what they see on paper.
Our
It's all
compost
done
heaps
through
are
a
also
mobile
pretty
app.
impressive.
To get
So
one
head
of
north
those,
from the main
you'll
entrance,
need to go online
past
and
the
find a
first gardens
website like
and take the
eBird
first
or
turning on the
Nestwatch.
left.
If
Go
you've
to
never
the end
signed
of
up
that
with them
path.
before,
The
register
compost
your
heaps are
details
built in the shape
and they'll
of a
send a
letter
mobile
U.
app to your phone.
The drying room is
Once you've
also
got that
interesting.
sorted,
This
you need
is
to
where we
consider
dry
exactly
fruit
where
to
you're going to
preserve
count
it.
the birds.
To see how it's done,
You
walk
might
up
decide
through
to
the
spend the
gardens
day,
till you come
say,
to the
just
orchard.
in a single
Keep
field.
heading north, and
Or
the
you might
drying
want to
room is
cover a
right
wider
at the very
area.
end of
It's
that
up to
path,
you.
as far as you can
Stay
go.
away from privately
Now,
owned
one
land,
other thing
because
I'll
you'd
mention
need to get
are the
authorization
outside
for that.
toilet facilities.
The next thing to do is get some other people to come
That is
along
the
and help
end
you.
of part 2.
A group that are
You
also
now have
interested
half
in
a minute
birds
to check
and
your answers.
that are capable of using the technology. Yes, because by yourself, it's easy to miss the birds that might be in the trees behind you. Then, on the day of the bird count, you need to give all your helpers a printout, showing pictures of the birds you're hoping to see. The pictures should be clear enough so people can really distinguish between similar-looking species. So yes, the document should be in colour, really. Also, remind people that the bird count is not a race to find the most birds
Exam
possible.
practice test
It's
4.
supposed to be a group
listening
effort,
part 3.
with everyone staying in the same place.
You will hear 2 technology
What
students
else?
called Alia and
Okay,
Jason talking
at the end
about
of the
their
day,
joint presentation
once all the
on
counting's
benefits
been
of playing
finished,
video games.
get together with the rest of the
First,
group.
you have time to look at questions
How many
21
birds of one
to
species
25.
has everyone seen? Compare notes. It doesn't really matter if your totals are slightly different. Just get everyone to work out and decide, more or less, what the probable number was. Finally, when you're ready to submit all the data you've collected, have a look at the pictures you've taken. Choose the best one. You want a sharp image of a single bird rather than an image of a whole lot of birds in the distance. Upload it with your data, and you never know, you might get a prize if yours is the best shot. All
Now
right,
listen carefully
let's
and
move
answer
on to the data.
questions 21 to 25. That is the end of part 2.
Well, Jason,
Now
shall we
have
do some
half a
planning
minute
for our
to
joint
check your
presentation?
answers.
Yeah, let's compare the reading we've been doing. Did you read that article by Dr. Franklin?
Yes, the use of games in therapy.
So, we'll need to explain what kind of therapy he's talking about.
Okay, so it's treating people after accidents or illnesses, rebuilding their body strength.
Exactly. And Dr. Franklin sees huge potential for games.
But he made the point that this isn't new. Really, since the 1990s, therapists have been experimenting with games.
Yeah, I agree.
Exam practice.
Dr. Franklin
Test
illustrated
3.
that this has been
Listening,
going
part
on
3.
for many years. It's not a
You
sudden
will hear
breakthrough.
2 art history students.
I was hoping he'd give
Chloe
some
and
idea
Oliver,
about how many
talking
health
about the
professionals
research
now
they have
employ
done
games
on the
in therapy.
restoration and
He
reproduction
doesn't
of
really
old
address
paintings.
that, does he?
First, you have time to look at
Okay,
questions
so
21
what's
to
the
25.
biggest advantage of games in therapy?
Well, most games are played in virtual reality, so the patient is moving their arms and legs, exercising their body.
So I guess it's quite cheap then.
Yeah, but so are conventional exercises. I don't think that's an issue.
No, okay. But I read that the games are really motivating. People are much more prepared to spend hours on rehabilitation when a game's involved.
I think you're right. That's the most important benefit. In fact, I read some people actually get so caught up in the game they hurt
Now
themselves.
listen carefully
and the
and
therapists
answer
have to slow them
questions
down.
21 to 25.
Then, did you read about the Singapore study?
Yeah, I started.
Okay,
They were
Chloe,
investigating
let's
whether
put the
people
presentation
actually made
together.
more friends by
What
playing
do you want
games,
to
right?
include in
That's
the
right.
introduction?
They got a group of teenagers
Well, we're
and
looking
over
at the
60s
restoration of
together for 30
old
minutes a day
paintings
and
and
the
video
reproduction.
games.
So we
But
should
the
begin with a
subjects weren't all in the same
definition
place.
to show
They were
how
playing
those two
online.
things are different. No, they were all
Is
together
that
in a
necessary?
room. That's how the
Let's
experiment
start
was
in a
conducted.
visual way. Show
We should
some
check.
paintings
I'm
that
sure
have
it
been
was
restored
online.
and
You'll
talk
find
about
I'm right.
why it was
But
necessary.
anyway, the study found a real
So,
social
for
benefit
instance,
to
a
game
painting
playing.
that was damaged by water
interesting.
and another
So
one
many
by
people
insects
say that games
or
are
by
solitary.
sunlight.
Okay, well,
let's
the
go
Singapore
with that.
study showed the
It'll
players
get
develop
everyone's
empathy for
attention.
each other and bond
After
over
the
games.
introduction,
A good
we should
point
tell
to make in the
everyone
presentation.
about our museum
Then
visit.
I also had a look
Yes,
at the anxiety
it was
study.
great to see
I
people
haven't seen that
restoring
one.
paintings in front of
Well,
us.
they
Did
experimented
you know that
with
most of the
children waiting to
restorers
see
we
a
met
doctor.
didn't have a degree in
Some
art
were allowed
history?
to play games and
They've
some
done
weren't.
things like chemistry
Was there
and
a particular type
archaeology.
of game?
I never
well,
would have
just
imagined
simple
that.
ones on
Me
handheld
neither.
devices.
I had
and they
no
found
idea
that the
those
children
kind
who
of
played
skills would
games
be useful.
experienced considerably
Apparently,
less
a
stress
painting
and
can take a
anxiety.
year to clean.
Games distract
I
the
guess
mind.
it would.
That's the theory.
And one
Better
guy
for the
I spoke
children,
to
but
told me
also
they're
better for the
always
parents.
experimenting.
That's what I like about
reading
this.
up on different
good
ways to
point.
clean the paintings.
It reduces the stress
So,
for everybody.
would you be interested
there just
in a
needs
career
to be
in
some
art
additional
restoration?
research to
You
support
know, you
the
don't
finding.
actually need to be able to
We
draw.
should also
so it
mention
might
the
suit
Rhode
you.
Island research.
Very funny.
Maybe.
Look,
but the
I think
finding
it would
just
be a great
reinforced
job,
what's been
but
shown
I
in
wouldn't
earlier
choose to
studies.
do it.
The
You get to
people can be
work in
distracted
interesting
from their
places.
bad habits,
That's
like
true.
eating junk food
I mean,
or drinking
sometimes
fizzy
you'd
drinks,
be working in
or
a
playing
public
games.
place, like
But
restoring
no
the
one had
paintings
used
high up on a
MRI
church
scans
ceiling.
before. With the
And
public
the brain
watching,
scans
showed that
I
games
wouldn't mind
activate
that.
the same
But
reward
the thing
centers
is,
in the
when
brain
someone
as the
owns
drinks
the
or
painting
junk
you're
food.
working on,
This study
you've
has
got to
supplied
get it
valid
right.
proof as to why
What if
games
they didn't
work
like the
this way.
colors you'd used?
Actually, that's
Too
a
much
good point.
pressure.
And many
True.
people would probably
Since we
like to
visited
know
the
about
museum,
that.
I've been researching other restored paintings. One was a
Before
Dutch
you hear the
landscape.
rest of the talk,
it had
you
been
have some
hanging in
time
a
to look at
museum for
questions
over
26
100
to
years,
30.
and everyone just thought it was a nice scene of people on the beach. And then a restorer started cleaning it and discovered someone had painted over a whale.
A whale?
Yes, the original artist had painted a whale on the beach, and later, I suppose the painting was bought by someone who thought the whale ruined a pretty scene, and they paid another artist to cover it up.
You must be right. Not everyone judges a painting in the same way,
Now
obviously.
listen and answer questions
Anyway,
26
we'll have plenty
to
to
30.
say about restoration. What about digital reproduction?
So then, in the
Yeah,
presentation,
digital
we need
technology
some
is
more
having
quite
research
an
findings.
impact on the art
Well,
world.
I read an
We
interesting
can now
study
reproduce
about
famous
surgeons.
paintings, and you can
It was
see
in the
something
USA,
that looks just
and
like
it
the
found
original.
that surgeons
I guess
perform
the
better
difference
when they
between
play
a
video games
digital
in their free
reproduction
time.
and a fake
That
painting
makes sense.
is no one's
I mean,
pretending it was
games are
painted by the
obviously gonna
original
improve
artist.
hand-to-eye coordination.
And what I like about
Yeah,
digital
I guess it's
reproduction
predictable.
is you could
Still
potentially make
interesting, though.
lots of copies,
Absolutely.
so a wider audience
Challenges
can
the
see
idea
them.
that games are just a
Maybe.
waste of time.
I'd rather look at the real
Then there was a
painting.
study about vision and eyesight. Apparently, games may
Before you
actually
hear the rest
improve
of the
vision.
talk, you have some
Game
time to look
players
at
in the
questions
study could see
26 to
differences
30.
in grey colours more effectively.
That's odd though, isn't it? Because there are also studies showing a link between electronic screens and eye damage.
Yeah, it's certainly controversial.
I also read a study about sports. There's a company that makes video games which are supposed to encourage physical exercise. The idea is you play the sport first in the game, and then you're more likely to do it for real. And the study apparently confirmed it.
Well, I doubt that's really true.
Now
I
listen
know.
and answer questions
Seems highly unlikely to me.
26 to 30.
Maybe just a marketing tactic by the company.
The study about aging was a good one.
if we're talking about
Scientists
digital
in Germany
reproduction
found that
of
games
art,
have a
we
positive
have to mention
influence
the
on
company
older
Factum
people
Arte
by keeping their
and how they
brains
reproduced
active.
famous paintings
And
that
that's
had been
going to be
lost
more
or
and more
damaged,
significant
so they can go on
as the
public
population
display.
ages.
Good idea.
Good news for game
Let's
manufacturers.
note down the challenges the team faced.
I also read that games can
What
actually
about
help
Vincent
your
van
career.
Gogh's six
The problem
sunflowers?
solving,
The
decision
original
making,
painting was
and
destroyed.
leadership that are
The team had
developed
a
in
photo
some
of it,
games,
but it can
wasn't
actually
very
make
clear.
you more
Right.
effective in the workplace.
They couldn't see how
And
Van
there's
Gogh
been
had
quite a
used
lot
his
of
brush.
previous research
They
to
knew
back
the
that up
National
too.
Gallery had a nearly
Interesting.
identical sunflower
Then,
painting by
another
Van
one
Gogh,
that I found.
and so they had to ask the gallery whether the team would be allowed
That
to
is the
study
end of
and
part
scan
3.
it, so
You
they
now
could
have
reproduce
half a
the
minute
brushstrokes
to
in the
check
right
your
way.
answers.
They got approval in the end.
What about the concert? The original was stolen, right?
The team had a photo they could use, but the problem was it was a photo of the concert after someone had tried to touch it up with fresh paint.
And they'd done a terrible job, hadn't they?
Yes, but the team were happy with the reproduction in the end. We should mention the portrait of Sir Winston Churchill.
Churchill hated that portrait, so his wife burnt it and nothing was left.
So, the Factum Arty team
Exam
had to search
practice,
for the
test
pencil
4.
sketches the artist had
Listening,
also
part
made
4.
of Churchill as part
You
of his
will hear
preparation.
an anthropology
Right.
student
For
giving
me,
a talk
I was
about
most
traditional
interested
Polynesian
in the water
navigation.
lilies.
By
First,
Claude
you have some
Monet.
time to look
In
at
that
questions
case, the
31
painting
to
wasn't
40.
lost, but the top layer of paint had turned completely black because of smoke from a fire. The team had to work out what the colors beneath that layer had been.
And then there was Marito, a painting by Tamara de Lempicka. No one knows for sure what happened to the original. At least the team had a black and white photo they could work from.
But they needed to know what colors Lempicka would have used. And most of her other paintings are held in private collections. Because of that, they couldn't go and see them. That's a shame, because her work would have been...
That is the end of part 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Hi everyone. Today I'm going to be talking about traditional Polynesian navigation and voyaging. Now, in case you don't know, the islands of Polynesia are in the Pacific Ocean and include Hawaii,
Exam
Tahiti
practice,
and
test
Samoa.
3. Listening, part 4.
All of these
You will
islands
hear a
were
student
originally
giving a
uninhabited by
presentation
humans.
about the challenges of
And
living
for many
in
years
space.
there was a debate
First, you
about
have
where the
some time to
Polynesian
look at
people had
questions
migrated
31
from.
to 40.
It was once suggested that they came from the Americas. However, that debate has been settled. Today, anthropologists recognise that the Polynesians began their journeys in Asia and from there migrated eastwards to the Pacific Islands. It's believed all the Polynesian islands had been settled by the 13th century. When European explorers arrived in the Pacific in the 17th and 18th centuries, they were impressed by the local canoes. European ships were much stronger, but the indigenous vessels were considerably faster when under sail. What we now know is that Polynesians sailed across open ocean, out of sight of land,
Now listen carefully
long before
and
this
answer
occurred
questions
elsewhere.
31 to 40.
And to make these voyages possible, they built remarkable
Hello,
ocean-going
everyone.
canoes.
So I'd like to tell
The
you
canoes
about
had
some of the
two
challenges
hulls,
of living in
so
space.
it's sometimes called
We'll
catamarans.
start with the International Space
They were
Station,
equipped with
or
large
ISS,
paddles,
as it's often
but these
called.
were not a form of propulsion.
The ISS has been in
Instead,
space
the paddles were
in
positioned at
orbit
the
around
back of the
Earth
canoe
since
to make steering the vessel
1998.
possible.
Over 200 astronauts have lived on board.
All these ocean-going
and one of the
canoes
biggest
had
challenges
sails.
for them is living in
Polynesian
microgravity.
sails were triangular
So,
in shape
what happens
and made
when
from
you're
the
living in
pandanus
microgravity
plant,
24 hours
which
a day
grows
for
on nearly
months.
all Pacific
For a
islands.
start, it affects your blood
It was
circulation.
also necessary to make
On
warm
Earth,
clothing,
your blood would
as
naturally
even in
be
tropical
pulled towards
waters,
your feet.
people could get
But
cold
in
on long
space,
voyages.
it goes to your head. And we'll talk a bit more
Materials
about
like
the
wool and
consequences of that
cotton were
later.
unknown to Polynesians.
But it also goes to your chest.
However,
and that's
the
why
paper
astronauts
mulberry
have to be
tree grows
careful
on
about
most
their
Pacific
blood pressure.
islands, and its bark was
Microgravity
remarkably
also affects the
flexible
minerals
and was
stored
used
inside
in
your
the
body.
manufacture of clothing.
Over time, for example, the amount of calcium inside your bones begins to decrease.
Next,
so
we
the
come to
bones
the
become
issue of
weaker.
navigation at sea.
Yes, it's not much fun
How did
living in
Polynesians
space.
find their way
The
once they were
astronauts
out
have
of
to
sight of
maintain a
land?
very strict exercise
We know that they did
program.
not have
They
the
do
magnetic
2.5
compass,
hours of
which told
exercise
other
6 days a
navigators
week.
which direction was
If they
north.
don't, what happens
But the
is that their
Polynesian
muscle
navigators
begins to
understood
waste.
where numerous
Some of
stars
it
rose
also
and
turns
set
into
on the
fat.
horizon.
And one
And using
final problem
this,
that some astronauts
they could
experience,
identify 32
they find that when
different
they get back to
directions.
Earth, they can't see
However,
clearly.
this information about the
Scientists aren't
stars was
exactly sure
extremely
why this
complex,
happens, but
and
it seems
therefore
that the
remembering it
astronaut's
all was a
vision
challenge.
can be permanently affected.
So the navigators had created
Another
long
challenge
and
with living in the
complicated
ISS
songs
is
to help them
you have to
recall
take
all the
everything
information
you
they
need with
needed.
you. So space agencies like NASA
Using
are
the stars
constantly
to
improving
navigate
the
was
way they
effective,
recycle things.
so long as the sky
Water,
was clear.
of course, is a vital
But
resource.
when it was cloudy,
and every
the
little
navigators
bit counts.
couldn't see the stars.
That means that even the
How
sweat
did they
that
find
the
direction
astronauts
then?
produce is recycled.
Well, they still
I know
knew
that
which
doesn't
way to
sound very
sail the
nice,
canoe by
but NASA
studying the
says
waves,
their water
which
is
usually
purer
came
than
from
anything you'd
predictable
drink on
directions in
Earth.
the Pacific at different times of the year. Sometimes they were
So,
sailing between islands they had
next?
visited before.
Humans are already
But
living
very
in
often,
space,
they were
in the
trying to
space
find
station,
new islands.
but now the goal is
How
to
did
live
they
on
know
the
that
moon
land
or
was
Mars.
nearby, just
For
over
this,
the horizon?
we need to make buildings.
Well, there were
And the
various
challenges
techniques.
for engineers and
The
architects
navigators
are
were
even
experts
harder.
at recognizing
It's
those
incredibly
particular
expensive
birds
to transport
whose
materials
habitat
into
was the
space,
open ocean,
so they need to be as light
and
as
those
possible.
that lived close to
The
islands.
alternative is to use materials
So this was
which
one
already
way they knew
exist
that
on the
land
moon
wasn't
or
far
Mars.
away.
And this does
They
seem
were
to be
also
the
skilled
sensible
at
way
noticing
forward.
changes
So
to
to
the
make
sea
buildings on the
itself.
moon, for example, we
The
could use
temperature
rock.
of the water is
and
constant
the moon
in that
also
part
has
of the Pacific,
plenty of useful
but
minerals.
its colour could vary in
These
the
can be made
proximity
into
of
metal,
land.
into brick.
And that was something
And
else that they
some
were able to
engineers
detect.
are also suggesting they could produce
Well,
paint.
as technology developed,
So it seems
traditional
everything we
voyaging
need for a
all but
basic
died
building
out.
might already
The
be
Polynesian
on the moon.
peoples travelled by
Actually,
steamship
there's one
and
thing
later
that NASA
aeroplane,
hasn't managed
like
yet,
everyone else.
and that's to increase the
However,
size
in
of the
recent
windows
history,
on
there
the
has been
ISS.
renewed interest in
They're
traditional
very small.
voyaging.
And
It
if
began in
people were going to live in
1976
buildings on
when
the
a
moon,
new canoe
this is something
named
NASA still has
Herculea
to work on.
was built as a replica of traditional
Even if we
Polynesian
managed
vessels.
to create a network of buildings
This canoe
for
was
people to
sailed from
live in
Hawaii
on the moon
to
or
Tahiti,
Mars and grow
a distance
food
of more than
and be
4,000
self-sufficient,
kilometres across
they would
open
still
ocean.
need mental stimulation.
All the navigation
and
was done
opportunities
using
to
the
relax
techniques I've
and
outlined
stay in
today.
touch with what was
The
happening
crew
back
did
on
not
Earth.
use modern instruments on the voyage.
Virtual reality could be the
Since
answer.
then, there has been a remarkable
Imagine you're
renaissance of
living on
traditional
the moon,
voyaging.
but you could use virtual
Numerous
reality
canoes
to
have
walk
been built
around a
in different
museum
Polynesian
and
countries,
see all the exhibits.
which have sailed to almost
That
every
would be
part of the Pacific.
incredible. And by using
And the
virtual reality,
Herculea
you
has
could
now
continue your
completed a
education
3-year circumnavigation
by, say,
of the
studying
world.
for a qualification that might
As
be
well as
useful
sailing,
in your current
these
environment.
voyages have sparked
or once
renewed
you're back on
interest
Earth.
among Polynesians
Now, Mars
in
is a
learning about their
different
traditional cultures. The canoes themselves
That is
operate
the
as
end of
floating
part 4.
classrooms,
You
teaching
now
young
have 1
people
minute
about,
to
for
check your
example,
answers.
the music their ancestors once enjoyed. Another aspect of this has been the teaching of Polynesian languages, some of which were in danger of dying out. Now, one thing I'd like to add is...
That is the end of part 4. You now have 1 minute to check your answers. That is the end of the listening test. In the Ielts test, you would now have 10 minutes to transfer your answers to the answer sheet. That is the end of the listening test. In the Ielts test, you would now have 10 minutes to transfer your answers to the answer sheet.